We're here on page Yud Aleph, and we're up to a paragraph that starts with Divrei Atosus, which is really a completion of what we did yesterday. So maybe we should start from Ketzad Osa, but we'll see. Tosfos says that Eino Yochel Litein Al Gag HaKeren HaBoletes. Oh, you know what? I think we're going to leave this out. This has to do with the sugya that we did yesterday. All right, Ketzad Osa. Now we're going to start with the case of Chatas. And Zrikas Hadam B'Chatas Eino Kishara Zrikos. Shechatos Eino Zorikas Hadam Min HaMizrach Limizbeach. Right? Usually, classic Zrika means you're holding on to the receptacle, the Mizrach, and you throw it from the Mizrach onto the side of the Mizbeach. But here, we need Tovel Esetzbo B'dam, and he takes his finger, which is dipped into the dam, and he does hazah, sprinkling it on the mizbech. That's the way it works in chatas. Ketzad Osa tovel es ha'etzba shehi ha'miyumenes limalacha, what we call the pointer. Shal yad yamin, he's got to do all the avodah with his right hand, and he dips it into the dam in the klishares, which he's holding now with his left hand. V'somech el ha'etzba es agudlo. Right, so he grabs on to his thumb, and he pushes his thumb up to the pointer. The esa amma lekan. So this is the amma, the middle finger, and he puts it on top. So that he has now, in effect, two fingers that are sort of helping him to do the hazah. He's being supported on the bottom by the thumb and on the top by the middle finger. The ezes hagudol va'ama hu moshech hasadam shebe'etzba klape mata. Right, so he pushes his hand in a downward motion. Sheyipol kulo lemizbeach. And that's the way, with that very forceful thrust of his finger and the help of the other two fingers, he gets the dam completely onto the mizbeach. Now he has to clean off his finger from the leftover dam. That's called mechate. The yored keneged chuda shel keren. So now we're talking about chatos, and the chatos requires hazah on the chronos of the mizbeach, which are the four corners of the top of the mizbeach. And now he wipes his finger on the pointed part of the keren. Right, the keren is a perfect square, and he wipes his finger on the keren. So now he has no more dam on his etzba, it's all on the keren. And that's the mitzvah of hazas dam bikronos in the case of a chat. Now, there's another shita here, which I don't want to confuse us. That's the shita of the, I'm not sure who it is. It seems it's Chazon Ish, I'm not sure. And he thinks that there's no hazah in the case of chatas. There's only maricha. Maricha means that he applies the dam directly from his finger onto the keren of his back. But I'm not sure if we accept the Chazon Ish. That is the Chazon Ish's opinion. We're going to go with the regular well-trodden opinion that he does a hazah on the keren. He doesn't wipe it or touch it directly. Now, the Gemara in Tzvachim on Daf Tzadi Gimel addresses the following issue. Is the Kohen required to do one hazah in which he gets all the dam in his etzba on the mizbeach, and if there's any dam left, then he can do a second hazah with whatever left over the dam? Or do we say no? That after he finishes his hazah, that action, that motion, he's now got to dip his finger again, a second time, into the mizrach in order to do a second zrika. So according to one opinion, every hazah requires a separate tvila, dipping his finger into the mizrach. The eino yachol hazos hazah nosefes min adam shenishu etzbo. If he needs a second hazah, again we'll have to go through the various chatos primius that require a series of hazos. But whatever it is, let's say we need 2 hazos. So one opinion says that you can't do 2 hazos without a tvila be'etzba for each hazah. So you have to be mafsik, so to speak. You have to separate the first hazah from the second hazah with a new tvila. It's kind of like Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. Before every single avodah, you need a new Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim. You can't say, well, I did Kiddush Yadayim Raglayim, let that last me forever and ever. And here too, you can't say that, well, I did a tvila, ba'etzva, and now I can continue doing hazahs. No, each hazah requires its own tvila ba'etzva. Tzarich litbol be'etzbo b'dam lifnei kol hazoyim. Ve'eno yechol lahazos hazah nosefes lafuke. What was the havmina? That he could do another hazah with whatever dam is nishar be'etzbo, the residue of dam on his finger. Now, what happens if some of the dam in the mizrach is attached to the inner rim of the mizrach? Because most of the dam is congregated, if you can use that word, is attached to one pool of dam at the bottom of the mizrach, but there's some dam. So is he allowed to swipe his finger around the top rim of the klishares and then do a hazah with that dam? Tzarech litbol etzbo b'dam v'lo lekaneach b'etzbo min adam shebekosel hakli. So there's dam inside the kosel hakli, and it's sort of attached. He thinks he can wipe his finger around and collect that dam. No. He's got to go down to the bottom of the kli with a tvila, immersing his finger into the bottom of the kli. Now, let's say that he completed his hazayah, whatever that means, either one hazayah or multiple hazayahs. He is now finished, and he has dam on his etzba. So that's called shiorei hadam. residue of dam left on his finger after he completed the hazoya. So now we have a problem because Shiori Adam liachar hazoya are possible. They don't belong on the mizbeach. So we discussed earlier about wiping his finger on the chronos. That's only relevant before the dam becomes possible. But now we're talking about a scenario in which the dam already became possible. So what does he do with the shiori adam be'etzbo, which cannot be placed on the mizbech? He can no longer wipe it on the mizbech because now it's possible. I'll read it again. Shiori adam shenisharu be'etzbo li'achar hazoya psulim la'hazoya. Now, if he would dip his finger again to do the second hazoya, he's got a problem because his finger still has shiori adam and has residue of dam, and that dam is possible. He's now mixing dam possible with dam kosher. How is he going to accomplish the next hazoya? So therefore, he must make sure that there's no residue of dam on his finger after the first hazoya, because that dam is possible. And he's got to get a kinuach to remove that dam before he does the zila for the next hazoya. He cannot wipe his finger on the mizbeach because that residue of dam, shiori adam betzbo, is possible in mizbeach. He can't put on the mizbeach that which is possible. It's lefichach tzarich lekanech shiori adam shebetzbo b'sfas hamizrach liachar kol hazah. After each hazah, again, we don't have to discuss yet how many hazahs he needs. That's going to divide up. But after each hazah, he's going to have to wipe the shiori adam on what he calls here the sfas hamizrach, because the mizrach is not the mizbeach. But what requires a lot of concentration here is to make sure that dam doesn't get mixed up with the dam on the bottom of the mizrach, because if that be the case, how's he going to do the next hazoya? The dam of the shiori adam is now possible. So apparently, the shiori adam will actually cling to the koslei hamizrach in such a way that it won't fall down, and he can do the next tevilah. I mean, to me, it sounds very tricky. Very iffy. Okay. Now let's get into the question: how many hazoyos does the Kohen have to perform in the case of a chatos? So now we're talking about a category called chatos pnimios, and they require 7 hazoyos. So these are special korbanos of chatos, hanisrofim, and the hazoya is on the mizbeach hapnimi in the heichal. The unim sheva hazoyos kineged haparoches. So right between the heichal and the kodesh kedoshim, there's a paroches, and he's got to do 7 hazoyos kineged haparoches. Again, it doesn't mean that the dam goes on to the paroches. It means the direction of the hazoya is towards the paroches, towards the heichal. We'll call it from east to west. The arba azoyos nosofos. So again, the first 7 azoyos are just landing on the ground. He needs another 4 hazoyos to land on the mizbeach. Why 4? Each one of the kronos hamizbeach require a separate hazoyah. So he's got a series of 7 hazoyos, which are keneged aparoches, that's the direction, and 4 hazoyos on the 4 kronos of the mizbeach hapnim. And one of the most profound sugis in Shas is actually about this issue of Hazoyos and Achatas Primis is really not in Zvachim, it's really in Masechta Yoma. Because on Yom Kippur, that's what the Kohen Gadol is going to do, Par V'Soyer Shel Yom Kippurim. Yesh min harishon shekosav shemakom hazoya keneged haparoches hu be'emtza b'makom of chuyin keneged badi ha'aron. Right. So the aron had 2 poles; those are called badi ha'aron, and the area between those 2 badim was really like on top of the Even Shasir. That was the Holy of Holies. And when he does the Hazoya, this Rashi Shita, and it's Keneged HaParoches, it's not just Keneged HaParoches in a general sense. The Paroches separates the Heichal from the Kodesh Kodshim, but it's got to be in a specific place, Keneged Badei HaShulchan. I'm sorry, Badei HaAron. Now, the Mishnah Melchi quotes here wants to know about Bayis Sheni. There was no Aron in Bayis Sheni. The Aron was already, the raiders were already raiding the lost ark, if you know what I mean. It was already a lost ark. But nevertheless, the halacha of Bein Abadim, Keneged Bein Abadim, applies even in the absence of the Aron. So Keneged Bein Abadim is the place, the location, not the heft itself of the Aron and its badim. And even in Bayis Sheni, they knew exactly where the Aron was and where the Bein Abadim was. So the Kohen Gadol knew exactly how to implement this Hazoya, the Sheva Hazoyas Keneged Bein Abadim, assuming he wasn't at Stoki. Mazeh Keneged is a makom sheyirtze legova parochos. Now, we're talking about a concept called matzlif. Do you remember that? You might remember that from either if you learned Masechta Yoma, or if you remember the Avodas Yom Kippurim, all the nuschos, the piyutim, kimatzlif. So the Kohen Gadol has to start high and then go low. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, till he gets to the 7th. Again, he says that there's no specific shear of Gova, how high up, let's say the first of 7 Azoyos, how high that is. That the Kohen Gadol will decide for himself, as long as he's very careful to implement the rules, and that is that the 7 Azoyos go from higher down to lower progressively. Azoyos Keneged HaParoches, Tzorech HaKohen Lamod Bein Pesach HaHeichal LaMizbeach HaPnimi. So now he wants to know, where's the Kohen Gadol standing when he does these hazayos? And he says that he should be standing between the entrance, right, the shar that enters into the Heichal and the Mizbeach HaPnim. I'm not sure why that's necessary. Harvest Sar Shel Yom HaKippurim. Okay, so these are two karbanos that fit the category of chatos pnimios. And each one of these two require shmona hazoyos. Now, I think the number 8 here is a little bit tricky, a little bit misleading. It's 7 plus 1. Is hazoya la'avir shebein badei ha'aron v'kodesh hakadoshim k'neged hakaporos. So we're not talking about the hazoya that we were speaking about before. The hazoya that we were speaking about before with hazoyas in the heichal. But now he's talking about hazoya in the Kodesh Kadoshim. How do I know this? He says, Kol echad mehem to'un hazoyat shmona hazos ala avir shebein badei ha'aron b'Kodesh HaKadoshim. And again, it's not keneged haparoches, but rather keneged hakaporos. Kaporos is the covering over the aron. And once again, the dam is not going on the paroch, on the kaporos. It's keneged hakaporos. Oh, now we go back to the hazoyos that we discussed earlier in the heichal. Ushmona hazoyos nosofos beheichal mul haparoches. We're no longer mul hakaporos because we're not inside the Kodesh Kodashim. But keneged mokum badei ha'or. Adam nofil ala oretz. Always bothered me. I wish I had more of a philosophical insight into these mitzvahs because the dam is Kodesh Kadoshim and you're sprinkling the dam on the floor. I don't know, it rubs me the wrong way. So this is called hazoyos of par v'soy. And now we have a separate set of hazoyos for the par, 8 and 8, a separate set of hazoyos for the soyer, 8 and 8. And that's not the end of the ballgame. Now we're ready for the tarobos. The achar mikan, after he's implemented the 2 sets of hazoyos, 8 hazoyos inside the Kodesh Kadoshim and 8 outside in the heichal. Now ma'arvin dam hapar v'asoy. Whatever he has left of the dam of the par and the dam of the soy has to be mixed together. Umaze midam hataroves. Arba hazos al arba kronos mizbeach hapnim. Yeah, there's a whole sugi about where he should start and where he should end. I don't know if he'll talk about that. So he has now, with this mixture of Dama Par and Dama Sor, four hazos on the four chronos of the Mizbech HaPnimi, and Sheva hazos al Taro Shel Mizbech. Taro Shel Mizbech is the top of the Mizbech, not the chronos. Now, the Gemara in Yoma asks why it's called Taro Shel Mizbech. L'tire means lenakos, to clean up. And what happens is that the avoda on the Heichal is on the Gaga Heichal, and that is with the burning of the Ketores. Again, not the special Ketores of Yom Kippurim, which is Lifnai Lifnim, that's in the Kodesh Kodshim, but the daily Ketores, which is 365 days out of a year, and that Ketores is burnt on the Gag of the Mizbech HaPnimi, so that you've got plenty of ashes there. So you have to clean off the ashes before you could do a hazah on the Gag of the Mizbech HaPnimi. And that's called Taro Shel Mizbech, meaning after he pushes aside the coals that were used to burn the Ketores, he exposes some small area on the top of the Mizbech HaPnimi, and that's where he does the hazah on the Taro Shel Mizbech. Let's just calculate how many hazos. He's got eight, and 7. Am I right? Just 1 second. No. At 8 plus 4, and again 8 plus 4. Got 4. No, I made a mistake. And then it's 7 plus 4. Did I say 8? So it's 8 plus 4, 8 plus 4. No, it's okay. Just let me get it right. It's like in the Kodesh Kodshim. How many hazos do we say he has? He's got 8 hazos. In the Heichal, he has 12 hazos. And then after the 12 hazos, then he has another 4 hazos, plus another 7 hazos, another 11 hazos. Are we duplicating the same number? Just 1 second. Case, no, we're not duplicating the same number. Because now we're dealing with after the Tarova, so the Dama Par and the Dama Soyer, which is going to require 4 hazos on the 4 chronos, plus another 7 hazos on Taro Shel Mizbech. Let's see if we can just fit in one. Hazos elu shel bein abadim v'shel paroches nasos achas lamala v'sheva lamata. right? So it's really not 8, it's 7 plus 1. Shemaza zo achas shegav yodo lemata upnei yodo klapi mala. That's one azah. And then he turns his hand the other way. Sheva azos kishe Sheva azos shegav yodo lemala upnei yodo lemata. So the first hazah, he's got to do it this way, right? With his hand facing, the palm of his hand is facing up, and the gav of his hand is facing down. And then he adds 7 azos. Shegav yodo lemala upnei yodo lemata. Going in this direction. So the first one is this direction, and the other 7 is this direction. Umoda b'fiv. Moda b'fiv means, you remember, of course, from Yom Kippur. He counts out loud, achas. Achas v'achas. Right? He doesn't explain why he does it that way. Why is he repeating achas every single time for the 7 azos? He only does 1 azah. Achas v'achas azor rishon shalamata she azor shnia. I don't know. He doesn't explain it. If I remember correctly, the Gemara has a whole dune as to why he counts in that way. Okay, then. So we'll